gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Sports Talk with Austin, your daily dose of sports and entertainment. And today on the show, we are going to be talking all things college football week 10 as we preview the upcoming week. And can you believe that we're already at week 10, that it's already almost the season's almost over? It felt like yesterday. It was week 3 of the college football season, but here we are. It is officially week 10. And I'm here to break you down and give my previews and predictions of this week's games. And let's jump right into it, shall we? Shall we? And starting off with a couple Thursday night games, shall we? Everyone loves a good Thursday night football game. You got TCU at Texas Tech. You got the Horned Frogs traveling to Lubbock on a Thursday night. This is very interesting because you got TCU and Texas Tech both coming off bye weeks this past weekend, and both teams are going to have to have 2 weeks to prepare for this game. And they're very fresh. TCU with Chad Morris. He was Chad Morris. TCU. They're a very confusing team because they got shut out before the bye week against Kansas State. And then the week prior to that, they obliterated BYU 44-11. And obviously, this is not the TCU of last year that made the national championship magic carpet ride run. But TCU is a very hard team to figure out, just as Texas Tech is, because they have some very confusing results as well. Losing to Oregon, who many people believe is a top 5 team in the country, maybe the best team in their conference, and they only lost 38-31. If it hadn't been for the pick six, maybe they would have won it. But then they lose to Wyoming. These two teams are like Jekylls and Hydes. One minute you think they're this, the next minute they're that. And this game here, it's very interesting because it's in Lubbock. Texas Tech has a very rowdy home environment, but TCU has proven they could go on the road and get a win because they've proven that they can go on the road and get a win. They've proven that. But can they do it against Texas Tech, who a lot of people had a lot of high expectations for as well? Maybe even a dark horse sleeper in the Big 12, and maybe an NY6 contender, and then the loss to Wyoming and then the loss to Oregon kind of slowed the hype down, kind of with like TCU. But for me in this game, it's going to come down to quarterback play. Whose quarterback makes less mistakes? Who doesn't turn the ball over? Who's more accurate with their throws? And I think that's going to be TCU. I think they'll be able to establish more of a running game. I think TCU will be able to take the home crowd out of it. And I think the Horned Frogs get a gutsy road win, and they need it to get. Both these teams are not bowl eligible yet, but TCU, I think, gets one step closer, and I think they get a gutsy 28-24 victory over the and Red Raiders on a Thursday night. Another Thursday night out in ACC country, you got Wake Forest at Duke. You got Duke, who hopefully Riley Leonard will be healthy and ready to play this game. He was last week against my Louisville Cardinals, of course. But you got both these teams who got drubbed. Wake getting drubbed 41-16. Duke getting drubbed 23-zip, getting shut out. Both these teams, Duke had such great success. Then they lost to Notre Dame. Then Ryan Leonard got hurt. The backup came in, was able to get the win for them. 24-3 over the NC State Wolfpack. And now here we are again with Duke. They dropped out of the top 25, kind of off everyone's radar. Can they bounce back? Can Riley Leonard right the ship? And they're at home in front of the Duke Crazies. But Wake Forest, their team who also got drubbed, who are looking for a little payback as well, trying to get back on the right track. Wake Forest, they lost Sam Hartman in the transfer portal to Notre Dame, and now they're kind of floating. Dave Clawson's kind of got them floating. Maybe they'll make a bowl, maybe they won't, depending on what Wake Forest shows up. But I think Duke, looking at it from their perspective, even with their 2 losses in the ACC, they still have a slight chance, if all craziness happens, to maybe make the championship game, maybe. But Duke definitely needs to bounce back in this game. Wake does as well, but I think Duke needs this more to show that they are legitimate and that they are not a team that's just going to fall apart like, say, Syracuse. And I think Riley Leonard needs to have a big day in this game. I think the Duke defense needs to respond. And I think Duke at home, they will play much better. And I think Duke gets it done at home 20-17. I think the Devils get it done at home. Now, on to a big matchup within the SEC. On Saturday, you got number 14 Missouri at the number one team in all college football, the Georgia Bulldogs. This is arguably the biggest matchup in the SEC to date up to this point. You know, you got the Georgia Bulldogs who will be without Brock Bowers for a couple more weeks, maybe even all season, depending on how the injury progresses. But Lad McConkey, Carson Beck, that run game seems to be working. Georgia seems to show that, hey, we can beat you more than one different way. And then you look at Missouri. Missouri, Eli Drinkwitz has Missouri at 7-1, playing some of the best football in program history, arguably. Brady Cook looking good. They're coming off a bye week, had 2 weeks to prepare for this. Georgia coming off a drubbing of Florida. Both these teams, you know, this right here, will decide who wins the East. Because Missouri, with this win, would be in first place in the East, would own the tiebreaker over Georgia. Georgia wins, they more than likely would punch their ticket to Atlanta because Missouri is the last team standing in their way. We all remember this game last year where it was 29-26. Missouri almost had it, but they turned the ball over and they just could not finish the job. This year they're coming to Athens over the hedges. This is going to be a rowdy environment, especially since Missouri's in the top 15. Team Georgia's not going to take them lightly as if they would have like last year. I think in this game here, I think Georgia, a lot of people make fun of their cream puff schedule, but now they're getting into the meat of their schedule. They got Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Missouri this week, and then they got Georgia Tech, who seem to not be all that bad. I think, and you look at Missouri, they're 7-1. Eli Drinkwitz has seemed to save his job for another year or two, possibly even longer. The way he's had this team playing football, I think, I think this is a game that if this was at Missouri, I would pick Missouri for the upset. But this is at Georgia. Georgia rarely loses at home at all, if at all. I think the Bulldogs. I think they come out and assert their dominance because all the talk's going to be around. Could Missouri shake up the college football playoff landscape? Could they shake up the SEC East and the SEC altogether? I think Georgia's going to hear that. They're going to use that as motivation, especially what happened last year. I think the Dogs get it done 34-17. I think Carson Beck has a big day through the air. And now on to another massive game within the Big Ten. Except this time it's within the Big Ten. You got number 3 Ohio State at Rutgers. Who would ever thought Ohio State Rutgers would have been a big time game to watch out for? But here we are. You got Ohio State coming off a 24-10 win over Wisconsin and Madison. Madison, they're currently 8-0, looking like one of the best teams in the Big Ten, besides maybe Michigan and Penn State. Kyle McCord, this past Saturday did not play his best, but the run game for Ohio State led the way. The defense for Ohio State has been phenomenal all year long, has shown that they can win games more than one way. And then you got Rutgers, who are 6-2 coming off a bye week. Rutgers is finally bowl eligible for the first time since the 2020 season. You know, and they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. Ohio State's coming off of a gutsy win in Wisconsin and Madison. This is going to be a very interesting environment because I feel like Rutgers, they're going to have a lot of fans in the stands, especially with the top five opponent coming into town. I think Rutgers wants to make some noise and maybe spoil Ohio State's season just a little bit. But I think Rutgers. They remind me kind of Iowa. Their defense has been pretty. Their defense has been not as good as it should be, but the offenses seem to be competent somewhat. They seem to show sparks throughout the season, but their defense, it's not very good. Putting it nicely, they have shown against some of the worser teams, like against Indiana, but a lot of teams can do that against Indiana. I think in this game, it's going to come down to, can Rutgers cover Marvin Harrison, and can the Rutgers defense, who have not been very good, stop the run game? I don't think. I think they'll stop the run game just a little bit, but it's hard to cover Abuka and Harrison. I think the Buckeyes get it done, but I think it's closer than people think. I got it being a 27-20 Buckeyes win. I think they win it close, a close one on the road. Now on to an interesting ACC matchup. You got number 4 Florida State at Pittsburgh. Now, Florida State coming off a 41-16 win at home against the Wake Forest Demon Deacon. Florida State looking like a team that could possibly go the whole distance, but they're playing the Pittsburgh Panthers on the road, and I know people will look at this and say, well, Pitt just got drubbed 58-7 over the Irish, but this is where Pitt shines. Pittsburgh, they're a team that if you come in the top 15, top 10, and you're playing them at home, they tend to surprise more than people think. And Florida State's coming in top 4, possibly even higher depending on the CFP rankings taking place on Tuesday, depending on where the committee has them. But I feel like this has trap game written all over it. This is Pat Narduzzi's special. He's done it once this year against my Louisville Cardinals. We were coming off of a big win over Notre Dame, and then we took Pittsburgh maybe too lightly. I think Florida State, they're coming off these dominant wins, and now that they're on the road again after having a couple home game stretches and dominating teams, I'm not saying that they're going to take Pitt lightly, but there's a possibility this game could be closer than the experts think. But I still think Florida State, being the more talented team, will get this done. I ain't going to pull the trigger on Pitt in this game, but I do think that they're going to give Florida State a scare, especially since this is at Pitt. I think they give them a scare, but I think it's one of those things where you come out of it saying, Florida State didn't have their best stuff, but they got it done on the road in a scary environment, especially for top 5 teams, top 15 teams. But I got Florida State winning 26-22. I got the Noles pulling it out. And now on to a decently interesting game. You got number 9 Penn State going at Maryland in College Park. I mean, this right here also has a little trap game written on it, especially after what happened last week in Happy Valley as Penn State nearly escaped Indiana 33-24 after they nearly escaped. And then you got Maryland, who lost to Northwestern 34-27, have kind of fallen apart after the Ohio State game. This is very interesting because Penn State next weekend's got a big date with Michigan at home. This has trap game written on it as well. But I think Penn State, I think they're going to bounce back in this game. I think Maryland, their defense is kind of falling apart a little bit on them. The offense, Tulia Tagovailoa has showed that when he gets pressure in his face, that he can be picked off, that he can be sacked, and it slows down Maryland's offense. And I think in this game here, I think Penn State's going to do that. They're not going to let the trap game possibly get to them. I think Penn State bounces back in a big way, 38-15, and they get a big road win in College Park. Now on to another interesting game which is not any conference game. It's a game we all thought would be one of the highly ranked matchups coming in this weekend, but Clemson has fallen off just a little bit. And I'm talking about number 12 Notre Dame at Clemson. And Notre Dame coming in this year got Sam Hartman, got their guy, and they had a lot of national championship aspirations, thought he was the missing link, the missing piece to this team. And, so far they're 6-2. They seem to be having things together at the moment. after their after their loss to my Louisville Cardinals, and then the goal line heartbreaker to Ohio State. Everyone is looking at this game. This might be a revenge game for Clemson, but Clemson, especially after last year in South Bend, you know, this is very interesting, but very interesting game from the standpoint of this is not the same Clemson team in years past because Clemson refuses to use transfer portal. They got to make some coaching changes. Kate Klubnik has played some good football, but he's also played some not so good football. I think this will be a noon game in Death Valley. I think if this was a night game, Clemson, this would benefit Clemson so much more if this was a night game like it was last year. But since this is a noon game, it's not going to be as rocking as it would if it's night. Don't get me wrong, Clemson's going to pack that stadium, especially with the revenge factor on their mind against Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has a tendency, when all the hype and attention get around them, to kind of let that go to their head and let them cost them at the end. But Notre Dame has shown that their offense can thrive. Jared Parker can show he's a good offensive coordinator. But for this game here, I think it's going to come down to the defenses. We know what these offenses can be. Notre Dame has shown flashes of what their offense can be, but they've also shown flashes of the bad Notre Dame offense. Same for Clemson. I think it's going to come down to who wins in the trenches, who can run the ball better, who can set up their quarterback better. I think in this game here, I'm going to pick Notre Dame. This is a big spot for Notre Dame, and Notre Dame, I'm going to trust that you're not going to let me down. You're going to prove me right that I can trust you in this big game. You're going to go into Death Valley, get a big win, and keep your NY6 bowl hopes alive and prove that you are not a fluke and that you are legit and that when the national media starts talking about you a little bit more, that you don't let it go to your head. But I got Notre Dame winning this game 23-10. I got the Irish winning 23-10. Now on to the last edition of the Bedlam rivalry. Number 10, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. And two different teams coming in from two different aspects of this. You got Oklahoma coming off of a surprise upsetting loss in Lawrence, Kansas. And then you got the Oklahoma State Pokes, the Cowboys, coming in on a 4-game winning streak, and they're sitting at one loss in the Big 12, looking possibly to spoil Oklahoma's chances of making a trip to Jerry World at the end of December, and maybe even spoiling CFP hopes. And Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, has really turned this team around. Alan Bowman, the Oklahoma State team, ever since that 33-7 loss at home to South Alabama, they seem to find ways to get the job done. They even beat Kansas, who just beat Oklahoma. So Oklahoma State's got this game going. This is the last edition of Bedlam. Emotions are going to be high. It's going to be one of those games where I think we're in for a treat Saturday. This is going to be an instant classic. I think Oklahoma, though, they do need a bounce back, though. Dylan Gabriel and that offense needs to get it back together, show that wasn't a fluke, show that their offense is legit. The defense gave a lot of rush yards and a lot of points, showed the flashes of Oklahoma's of the past, defenses of the past under Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch. But I think Saturday Brent Venables is going to rally the troops, knowing that emotions going to be high, rivalry game. But I think Oklahoma bounces back at home. Bounces back, goes into Stillwater, gets the road W, and doesn't make it 2 in a row and keeps their CFP hopes alive. But I got a 17-13 Sooners win in a sloppy win. But they get it done because they want to win this final game in the rivalry. Now on to a extremely important Big 12 game. Number 25, Kansas State at number 7, Texas. And the question is, will Quentin Ewers be healthy for this game? Unknown. But Kansas State, they're a team that was ranked earlier in the year. They had the 61-yard field goal, game-losing field goal against them at Missouri. They dropped out. Will Howard, wasn't looking like his best. The offense was stuttering in its tracks. They make the change after the loss to Oklahoma State on the road on a Friday night, and Avery Johnson has come in and they've shut out teams left and right. And Kansas State comes in with all the momentum, and Texas, you know, ever since the Oklahoma loss, has seemed they beat up on Kansas, who just beat Oklahoma, and then you had last week against BYU. This is very interesting because it all hinges on Quentin Ewers. The Texas D line has been getting to quarterbacks relentlessly, but they haven't seen a mobile quarterback as mobile as Avery Johnson, who had 5 rushing touchdowns 2 weeks ago, go against TCU. I think in this game, this is going to come down to Avery Johnson against that Texas D line. If he can get the running game going and force Texas to throw up a spy, that's going to open up the passing game, and Kansas State can very well win this game. And that's what's concerning for me because Kansas against mobile quarterbacks, Kansas State, Texas against mobile quarterbacks have not been as successful as other teams have. But and also all hinges on Quentin Ewers' health. If he's healthy for this game, they could very much win this game. But if he's not, and it's Malik Murphy or maybe Arch Manning, the inexperience could come into play late, even at home. I've went back and forth on this game, but I'm gonna pick Texas. I think they're gonna win this game, but it's not. It's gonna be like Oklahoma. And it's not gonna be a very pretty win. I got Texas winning 33-29. I think I think the on Longhorns get it done at home. Now on to a massive SEC matchup. Number 13 LSU at number 8 Alabama. And boy oh boy, what a game we have on Saturday night in Tuscaloosa. The race for the SEC West Division heats up with an instant classic of last year's game, rematch of last year's game in Death Valley, this time in Tuscaloosa. Does Nick Saban let it happen 2 years in a row? Can Brian Kelly get it done 2 years in a row and keep the dreams of possibly running the table alive like they did last year, hopes alive again? Because this is the interesting key, because if LSU wins this game, they own the tiebreaker over Alabama, and then they own the tiebreaker over Alabama, and they could have potential to run the table once again like they did last year. And if they do that, they could possibly make it to the CFP this year. That's crazy to think about. But Nick Saban normally doesn't lose 2 in a row. Jalen Milroe and the Alabama offense have seemed to found their way. The defense has seemed to be playing their best football, holding teams under 20 points. Both these teams have had 2 weeks to prepare, coming off 5 weeks. I think in this game, it's going to come down to, can LSU's defense be competent, because we know Alabama's defense is going to be up for the challenge against Jaden Daniels and that potent LSU offense. It's going to be up to the LSU defense. Can they slow down a middle core Alabama offense? Can they show that, hey, we're not as bad as defense as you all thought. We're not USC level bad. But I just think Nick Saban, rivalry game, nighttime, Tuscaloosa, he doesn't lose 2 in a row. I picked against him in Tennessee. I shouldn't have done that, but I'm not going to pick against him here. I think the offense does just enough in this game. Defense creates some turnovers, and I think Nick Saban revenge tour is completed with a win over LSU. And I've got a 24-17 win over LSU as Alabama gets the W. And then on to the most important matchup, maybe of the weekend, besides Alabama LSU, especially if you're talking in terms of the Pac-12. You've got number 5 Washington at number 24 USC, 7:30 on ABC Saturday night. And this could go one or two ways, in my opinion, because You've got two defenses that are marginally bad, especially USC's giving up 49 to Cal. Cal this past weekend. Washington nearly lost on the farm in Stanford, giving up 33 points to that offense. I think this is a very interesting matchup. I can see this game going one or two ways. I can either see a shootout happening in this game where it's like a pinball machine and it's whoever has the ball last at the Coliseum wins this game, or I could see seeing it being where one of these offenses makes the other defense look better than it actually is. Because if the defensive lines can get pressure on these quarterbacks, they can be had. But I'm going to go and make the bet on that this is going to be like a pinball machine. But I think, you know, Washington, they've been playing way too close to their competition, been flying a little too close to the sun, as the old saying going. And I think, as bad as both defenses have been, I think USC, their offense, Caleb Williams, Lincoln Riley, they're going to dial it up. And Caleb Williams is going to have another Vincent Heisman moment in him to keep their Pac 12 title dreams alive. I got USC winning this game 45-41. A 45-41 Trojans win. I think Washington been flying a little too close to the sun for me, and I think USC gets them at home. But that was week 10. That was my predictions and previews. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Tell me if you like my picks or if you disagree with them. But more importantly, guys, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, click on that notifications, hit the like button, helps the algorithm, and let me know down in the comment what games you're looking forward in this week 10 of college football. But this has been Sports Talk with Austin, and I'm out this thing, man. Peace out. Enjoy week 10.